Welcome to Quest Tales. Here we journey beyond the veil of the ordinary into lands where magic breathes, swords sing, and ancient secrets wait to be uncovered. If you love fantasy, folklore, and the thrill of a well-told tale, you've found your sanctuary. So sit back, relax, and let the world outside fade away. The Sickness in the Stone. The stone halls of Emberhold had not echoed with elven footsteps for nearly a millennium. Dust clung to every dwarven carving, and rune-lined corridor like soot from a forgotten forge. High King Balgrim's Stonehammer sat upon the anvil throne, his once braided beard now loose and grayed with age. His eyes stared at the report in his hand, with the weight of 10 generations. "The stone's sickness," murmured Balgrim. "It spreads." Runesmiths and earth-singers had long whispered about the affliction, a slow decay of the very rock that held Emberhold aloft, the bedrock softening into powder. At first, only minor shafts collapsed, but now entire districts were closing. Temples crumbled, vaults cracked. "We must treat with the Elves," said Merla Deepvein, Minister of Lore. A silence colder than the mountain ice followed. The High King turned to her slowly. "You speak of the Ashen Accord. What treaty sealed in betrayal?" Merla did not flinch. "I speak of survival, Your Majesty. The roots of the mountain rot." Balgrim's fingers tightened around his report. The memory of the old war flared behind his eyes, but he nodded at last. "Then summon him." Thrain Forgewarden had once been a rising star of the Emberhold Council, bold, eloquent, and dangerously open-minded. His attempt to broker peace with the Elves after the Verdant Border War had earned him exile and disgrace. Now he mined rock in the deep veins alongside the lowborn. "Forgewarden!" growled a voice behind him. Thrain turned, wiping grime from his brow. A pair of royal guards flanked a steward bearing the seal of the anvil throne. "The king summons you." He laughed bitterly. "To execute me for my old crimes." The steward said nothing, but held out a sealed scroll and a fresh cloak bearing the sigil of the anvil throne. Thrain stared at it, then at his calloused hands, still dusted with stone grit. For a long moment, he stood rooted in the cavern, a rhythm of pickaxes echoing faintly behind him. Then, with a sigh deep as a mine shaft, he set down his tools. He unlaced the worn gloves from his wrists, rolled up his sleeves, and removed the chipped badge marking him as a laborer. The guards waited in respectful silence. He did not speak again until he stood at the threshold of the tunnel, looking back one last time. "Tell the foreman he won't need my shift filled. I don't plan on returning." Back in the high holes, Balgrim offered no apology, only duty. "You know their customs, their tongue, their wounds. Lead the delegation. Save Emberhold, if you still care for it." Thrain hesitated. Memories of his disgrace, the jeers of council holes and the sting of exile flickered behind his eyes, but beneath the bitterness burned a deeper loyalty. To Emberhold, to its people, to the stone itself. He gave a slow nod. If the mountain was truly dying, then no pride could weigh more than its survival. The burden of redemption, perhaps, was his to bear. Preparations began immediately. Word spread through the lower halls like molten ore, equal parts rumor and awe. The disgraced envoy would walk once more in the name of the anvil throne, into the heart of the forest, and toward the past long buried. A company of emissaries and stone guards departed Emberhold, led by Thrain and Merla. Their path wound through tunnels long unused, eventually breaking into the surface forest, the verdant vale. Every step stirred ghosts of war. As the caravan moved deeper into the elven lands, tensions ran high. Dwarven scouts reported movement in the treetops. Elves watched them from above, bows drawn, silent as ghosts. None dared fire the first arrow. Only when they reached the sun-petal clearing were they met by envoys of the Sylvani court. The clearing itself was a breathtaking expanse of wildflowers and tall grass, ringed by whispering silver-leaf trees that swayed in the perfect rhythm with the wind. In the center stood a shallow pool reflecting the dappled sunlight like a mirror of molten gold. Lady Aranwe Lirel stood upon a raised stone dais at the clearing's heart, carved with spiraling runes that pulsed faintly with elven magic. She was resplendent in living armor, a fluid weave of bark, blossom, and moonlight silver. Her golden eyes, hard as ember, scanned the dwarven party with the calm detachment of one who had seen centuries unfold like seasons. "Thrain Forgewarden," she intoned, a voice like wind over ancient leaves. "Still draped in the shadow of old regrets, I see." "And you," he replied, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Still weaving thorns beneath your petals?" So began the negotiations. Thinly veiled insults and ancient grievances played across every word, but beneath the posturing, desperation lingered. The elves, too, were not untouched by change. Their trees withered near the border, their crystal stores dwindled. They had reasons to parley. Though tensions remained thick as forge smoke, both sides recognized the cost of further hostility. With no small measure of caution, a temporary truce was struck. Talks would begin under neutral ground near the ruins of the last great battle, a site both sacred and scarred, where blood of both peoples once soaked the earth. There, amid the quiet reminders of old folly, they would attempt to shape something new, a symbolic act neither side took lightly. The elven delegation revealed a potential solution: soulroot crystal. Shimmering with an inner light, the mineral was harvested from the living roots of their oldest trees, an ancient essence believed to restore balance to damaged earth. It had long been used by the Sylvani to heal sacred groves, but never tested within the deep stone realms of the dwarves. Lady Aranwe extended a hand, presenting a single shard no larger than a thumb. "This fragment once restored an entire grove felled by fire," she said, her voice a melodic hush. "But it must be purified in flame, shaped by forge and chant, or it turns brittle and dead. For that, we require access to the deep water forges." The words struck like a hammer to the council floor. Outrage burst from the dwarven assembly. Fists pounded stone tables. Voices rose in protest. The deep water forges were not only sacred, they were the heart of the Emberhold's identity, the crucible from which their greatest relics were born. No outsider had ever seen them, much less set foot within. Merla raised her voice above the din. "We cannot grant this lightly. It is more than stone and flame. They are a piece of dwarven soul." But Thrain stepped forward, the glow of soulroot reflecting in his eyes. "If we let tradition blind us, we will be entombed by it. Let them in. Let them see our fire. Let them remember who we are." After tense votes and heavy conditions, the elves were granted controlled access. Under constant watch and with solemn ceremony, the soulroot was brought into the depths of Emberhold, and the forging began. At first, hope kindled. The stone sickness slowed. Cracks in the deepest holes ceased their spread. Earth singers, long silent, resumed their chants and claimed the mountain's pulse had steadied. But that fragile relief did not last. Deep below, something stirred, something the crystal had awakened. Within weeks, tremors shook the lower vaults. Earth singers collapsed mid-song, their voices drowned by dissonant echoes. Runes once steadfast began to flicker and fade, their ancient power unraveling like thread. From the darkest shafts came a sound no dwarf had heard in an age, a voice not made for ears, vast and terrible, whispering through the stone itself. Panic spread like fire through the halls of Emberhold. Vaults sealed themselves out of instinctive fear. Miners and runesmiths abandoned their posts. Even the bravest among the stone guard hesitated at the edge of the deep veins. The truth emerged in fragments, pieced together from half-lost songs and hidden archives. Long ago, the founders of Emberhold had bound a primordial titan within the mountain's core, a sentient force of earth and ruin, rage and memory. The soul root's resonance had weakened the runic prison that had held it in check for a millennia. The elves had sensed danger but not known its source. Now all knew. The titan stirred. The throne room dissolved into chaos. Accusations flew like daggers. Some called for the execution of the elves, others demanding retreat. But it was Thrain who climbed to the steps of Anvil Throne and turned to face them all. "We stand on the edge of ruin," he shouted, voice echoing through the stone. "And still we squabble. This is not the time for old wounds. This is the hour to forge anew." The silence fell, and in that stillness, something shifted. Thrain gathered a coalition, runesmiths, earth singers, elven archmages, and warriors from both sides. They descended together into the deep veins, following the echoes of the mountain's pain. The descent into deep veins was lit by more than torchlight. The weight of what was to come pressed on every shoulder, dwarf and elf alike. Thrain led at the front, his brow marked with soot and runes of purpose. Beside him, Lady Aranwe walked in silence, a silvery cloak trailing like mist behind her, the crystal light in her staff pulsing with anxious rhythm. The path narrowed as they neared the ancient chamber, a place the mountain itself seemed to resist. Runes etched into the walls sparked erratically. Faint whispers curled along the stone, not in words, but in emotions, hunger, rage, remembrance. Inside the chamber, the titan stirred, a vast slumbering shape of blackened stone and glowing fissures. It pulsed in time with tremors, shaking Emberhold. The bindings that once held it, great columns of inscribed volcanic rock, were cracked and weeping molten light. The coalition formed a circle. Earth singers began their chant, low and resonant, drawing power from the bones of the mountain. Elven mages answered in lithing harmony, weaving threads of light into the gaps between the runes. Thrain stepped into the center. He raised his father's hammer, once a ceremonial relic, now a tool of salvation, and struck the earth. The sound rang like a bell of judgment. "Return to stillness," Thrain commanded, his voice reverberating with the weight of the mountain and memory. "Not in defeat, but in remembrance. We do not erase, we bind. Not to forget, but to honor what was and to protect what must be. Yield to your prison, and let the stone sing once more in peace." The ritual began in earnest. Flames and starlight danced together. The runes performed, no longer etched by dwarves alone, but shaped by the will of two peoples. Sweat and tears mingled with chants. Sacrifices were made. Essence, memory, blood. At the climax, Lady Aranwe and Thrain joined hands, guiding the final binding rune into place. But the Titan did not yield quietly. With a deafening groan, it rose from the earth, breaking free of its half-shattered bindings. A towering colossus of obsidian and magma. It lashed out with limbs like quaking fault lines. The chamber shook with every step, and molten stone dripped from its jagged form like burning tears. Elves and dwarves scattered as the titan bellowed a soundless roar, a resonance that shuddered through marrow and stone alike. A runway was thrown back, her staff splintering. Thrain stumbled, catching himself on a fractured runestone. "Hold the lines!" Thrain shouted. "Earth singers, bind its limbs! Mages, strike the light!" Spells and chants surged through the chamber. Elven light burned like starlight across the titan's hide, while rune-bound chains of stone and flame tried to slow its movements. Still it surged forward, toward the ritual circle. With a cry, Thrain hurled himself forward, raising his hammer in both hands. He struck the ground with a tremendous blow, unleashing a shockwave of raw power. The ancient runes beneath the titan reignited, pulsing with golden fire. Aranwe, bleeding and pale, crawled to the center and laid her palm across Thrain's. "Now," she whispered. Together, they channeled the final rune, soul root light and dwarven might intertwining. The titan howled as the renewed bindings surged its limbs, locking its form in place. With a shudder, it collapsed inward, its body turning to stone, then ash. Only then did the mountain fall silent. The new prison was formed, not through force alone, but through sacrifice, through shared pain, and the forging of unity beneath fire and fury. A new accord was signed that day, not in ink, but in stone and blood, etched into the newly restored runes of the mountain's heart, where fire and memory had fused two peoples into one purpose. Thrain was named High Voice of Emberhold, not a king, but something older, a bridge between legacies, a speaker for both stone and leaf. His voice carried not just the will of the throne, but the quiet strength of reconciliation. In the weeks that followed, joint caravans ferried soulroot and stone, lore and labor, between Emberhold and Sylvani glades. Shared forges burned with both coal and crystal light. Dwarves learned to weave light into steel. Elves walked ancient halls once closed to them, singing to the rock in voices long absent. The healing was slow, imperfect. There were still old wounds, deep scars that no ritual could erase. There was also laughter in the deeps again. There were songs in both tongues echoing off the walls of the great halls. And in the deep, where once a titan stirred, peace held, not as silence, but as understanding. The halls echoed once more, not just with footsteps, but with forging of trust, echoing a new age born from the depths. That's it for today's story. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this tale, go ahead and hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories just like this one. Tap the bell so you never miss an upload, and if you have thoughts, theories, or just want to say hello, drop a comment below and I'd love to talk to you. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and keep exploring those forgotten places. See you in the next one.